I'm reading today from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 15 through 20. Jesus is speaking to his disciples. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them. That is a difficult teaching. It's a difficult teaching, and it's part of a difficult chapter in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew chapter 18 is not for the faint of heart. It's a difficult teaching because it's dealing with a difficult matter, which is sin. Sin in the Christian community. This particular section we've read envisions some ongoing destructive pattern practiced by a member of the Christian community. Jesus addresses it because he's realistic about what life is going to be like for his disciples in the life of the church. There will come times when one sins against another. It's bound to happen because, after all, the church is made up of sinners. Jesus doesn't let it go without comment because he has such a high view of his church. He cares deeply about how we function as the community gathered in his name. How we live with each other is extremely important. It matters when something goes on that destroys another person or even the whole group. What can be done? I hope you'll appreciate what Jesus is doing. He's addressing all of his disciples. He's laying a heavy responsibility on us, not just a few leaders, but every one of us. We don't get an escape route, as if I can just leave that to the small group of leaders. No, everybody has a vested interest in the health of the church and in the health of a Christian brother or sister whose sin is having a huge impact. So Jesus lays out a few steps. First, you go privately to the individual, just the 2 of you. Your aim is to win that person back. It's all about restoration. But if that doesn't work, if it's unfruitful, you go again. This time you take a couple of witnesses with you. Your aim is still the same, restoration. If that too is unfruitful, then and only then do you take it to the whole church. And even then, your aim is that that person will listen and turn around. Our aim is always restoration, but it's possible that even that will not go well, in which case the person has placed himself or herself outside the community that bears the name of Jesus. That is a truly frightening prospect, isn't it? The important thing in every part of the process that Jesus is outlining, the goal is the same, to restore. You want to win back that brother or sister. You want them to listen and respond positively. But it's so hard to hear. It's so hard to practice. In fact, we'll do just about anything to avoid what he's saying. One strategy is to do nothing, to say, it's none of my business, which is especially common in our day because to our ears it seems judgmental and intolerant. We say, who am I to decide that another person is caught up in sin? Aren't we all sinners? Where do you draw the line? Another common way to avoid Jesus' demanding path is to find a third person and complain about the one that you don't want to talk to this third party, which takes the pressure off. But this habit of talking about the person instead of talking with the person is gossip, and that does not help. Gossip does not lead to restoration. Gossip is a huge danger in any group, but particularly the church. Jesus has a high standard for us because he places such a high value on the spiritual life of every Christian. The reason you go and do the hard thing is because you care about that person who's caught up in some destructive pattern. You go directly to where the problem is located, and that is so difficult to do. Is it worth it? Jesus makes some promises that reassure us that it really is worth it if you do what he says. He says, when you do this hard thing, there's actually more going on than meets the eye. There's this connection between heaven and earth. The action you take here corresponds to what is taking place in heaven. And the greatest promise of all, the personal presence of Jesus himself. We love that promise. And sometimes we'll quote it to each other. When 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he is there in our midst. But notice that this promise is given to people who are engaging in those difficult tasks in the effort to restore the person who's gone astray. Now, I know that when I'm done with this sermon, it will still be a difficult passage, and there will still be unresolved practical questions that we haven't worked out. It's a difficult passage, and it's painful for us to imagine the situation that he's describing. It is a difficult teaching for a difficult situation. But still, there are a few principles that we can draw from it that will be helpful for us, even if the passage itself is still painful and puzzling. For instance, we can say with confidence that Jesus has high regard for the community that gathers in his name. He has high regard for each member of the community, both the one who has departed from his way and the one who wants to help. We can also say for sure that Jesus desires restoration at every step. Those drastic measures that he mentions are taken only when all else fails. So we can cling to his promise that he will be in our midst. Jesus is so committed to his church that he will be personally present when we're willing to do what he says. For that, we are grateful.